welcome to a special edition of Life Beyond Sunday. As you can see, the setup is a little bit different. I wanted to do a special edition, and since it's Holy Week, we're going to do it. So in this episode, it's going to be a short episode, and later on in another series, whenever we talk about the existence of God, we are going to go in a deeper discussion of this topic. But as you can see on the screen, you're talking about the Shroud of Turin. And if you don't know what the Shroud of Turin is, it is said to believe it has a 96% chance of being the actual shroud that Jesus was wrapped in whenever he was buried in the tomb. Now, before we do a little deep dive into this, and we'll do a deeper dive, like I said, in a couple of series ago, my faith in the resurrection comes fully from the Bible. Comes fully in the Bible. So we're going to put two and two together, see how they line up, and according to how Jesus was crucified, what does the prophecies about Jesus' crucifixion say, and how does it line up to the evidence that we now have. And so the shroud is a burial cloth that wrapped Jesus' crucified body in after he was crucified on the cross. Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea, they wrapped Jesus in this shroud, which was cloth. It wasn't like a mummified thing. The Jews didn't mummify people like the Egyptians did. What they did was, it was kind of like a pita sheet. Think of like a pita bread where you flip it over. You lay the body on one side, then you flip it from the feet over, and it covers the body. Well, this is the shroud, and hundreds upon hundreds of scientists have studied this shroud, and we're going to get into it today. And so in 1898, there's a Christian photographer, and they've always known that there was an image in this shroud. But like I said, in 1898, this Christian man, who we'll go into a deep dive later on, took a picture of the shroud in a dark room. Now, remember, cameras just came out about like 40-something years before this guy took a picture. The cameras were like these huge things that were like the size of the refrigerator. It took like 14 minutes to develop and get the focus right. But whenever he took a picture, he ended up getting this. So this is the shroud. So this is a one-of-one picture of a replica of the shroud and what it looks like. So shroud, and those little triangle things are patches because it's been through a bunch of stuff. It's been in like 5 fires, so they patched it to try to make it perfect. But the bottom picture here, this black and white picture, is the picture of the shroud. Now, if you don't know, there's an image on the shroud. And so whenever the photographer was taking the picture, he ended up having this image. And what we can see here is, you can probably see it, you probably cannot, but there is an image of a crucified man on the shroud. Now, we do have shrouds from hundreds of different people that have been crucified, but this is the only one that has an image on it. And we'll talk about why it's the only one with the image on it. But here we see the crucified body, we see his head right here, then we see the body, we see the hands, the fingers. But there's significance here, because we know Jesus is the only one that was pierced and had a crown of thorns twisted on him. In Isaiah 53:5 it says, "But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was a chastisement that brought us peace, and with his wounds we are healed." So he was pierced. If you've in all 4 Gospels, the Gospels, it talks that after Jesus had given up his spirit, which he died, which was whenever he died, he was pierced. Instead of, unlike the other 2 criminals that were crucified next to him, their legs were broken, but he was pierced. And so we can see that piercing right there, and we'll go into that diagram here. So we have the side wound, which is here, he was pierced, right? Then we also have the scorch marks, these little marks in this picture. You can kind of see them. They're little tiny white marks. Those are from the flogging, and we know that he was flogged. In Matthew 57, after he was on trial, Pilate Then he released for them Barabbas, and having scourged Jesus, flogging, whipped, delivered him to be crucified. Then the shoulders stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head. So in this picture, we see the face, right? whenever they knew that there was always an image on the shroud, but they never knew that it would be this proven. So what we see here is we see the body, like I've been saying, but we also see a face, and we also see the rune patterns from the crown of thorns. This picture is kind of blurry, but we can see it. Here we have the rune patterns from the crown of thorns, which he was the only crucified man that had a crown of thorns on him. Then we see it here. Then we see the shoulder abrasions from where he carried the beam of the cross. He didn't carry the whole cross, but he carried the beam that his arms would be stretched out, and he carried that. So he got there. We see the scorch marks on his legs. Then we see the feet wounds when he was nailed, right there and right there. And then we also see the nail parts on his wrist, which in the Bible it says hand, but the Greek word hand means everything. It means from your forearm to your little hand. That's all the same word. But we know that couldn't have been of his hand, because if it was his hand, he would just fallen off. But it had to be the wrist to hold him there. Now, how do we know that this thing is real and exists? Well, there's this one scientist, and he studied all the pollen samples that were taken off of the shroud. And 38 out of 50 of them came back from the same type of pollen found in Jerusalem. We also found remnants of clay on the feet area and the nose area. If you've read your Bible, you know that whenever Jesus was carrying the cross, he fell on the ground and his nose hit the ground because he couldn't carry it anymore. He was so brutally tormented that he couldn't carry the cross anymore. So that's where they found clay, and the clay matches the same clay in Jerusalem. And so now, talking about the craziest part, how did the image get on the shroud? Well, 33 different scientists have studied the shroud and couldn't come to a conclusion on why there was an image on there. But they found that there was hundreds of watts of energy on the shroud in a billionth of a second, which means that there was light. And whenever Jesus resurrected, there was light, and his resurrected body imprinted this onto the shroud. This is how we can have this image. And this is literally the first selfie ever made, was this. Whenever Jesus resurrected, he went through the shroud just like a flash of light. And if we read in the Bible, John went in the tomb, and he said, as soon as John saw the tomb, he believed. Well, we know that it was around dark. It was around dusk. It was not dusk. It was dark whenever they went to the tomb, because it was early in the morning. So they couldn't see anything unless there was light. So it is said to believe that the shroud and the face cloth, which was covering his face, were still glowing whenever John was going into the tomb. And so I just found this really interesting. I've been researching this for days, for hours of research into this, what it actually is, and I've never heard about it before. And it's one of the most controversial topics ever in the Christian faith, because not that many people believe. They're skeptical of this. And to be honest, I was skeptical of this too until I did deep dive into research and just listen to people talking about the doctor who studied this and just the evidence of this highly possibility being the same shroud that Jesus' crucified was buried on. And not only can the Bible prove that Jesus resurrected, but it is now science can prove. This has a 96% chance of being the shroud that Jesus' brutally crucified body was wrapped in. So thank you for tuning in to this episode of Life Beyond Sunday, our special Holy Week edition here in the studio. If you have a question or a topic that you want us to go over on a podcast, there's a Google form link in the description of the video. Please go and fill that out. It's also in the bio of our Instagram. And also, if you want to be a guest on the pod, we would love to have you on the podcast, and that's on the same forum as well. So thank you.